This was going to be called Why Make Games, but frankly, nobody knows. If I were to try and answer the question of why does every single game developer out there make content, I simply couldn't. I don't know, and nobody really knows. So maybe just, if I try to answer the question for myself, I can help you see a perspective, one of many, and if the question interests you at all, then you might find more perspectives, and most importantly, your own perspective. So why do I make games? Growing up, I did a lot of different things for entertainment. Surprisingly, video games weren't one of them. I'd play with toys, I'd draw, I'd model, and I'd play board games. This, I believe, is how my early imagination developed. I'd think up scenarios and effectively roleplay them out with toy soldiers or clay models. At some point, I grew fascinated by games like Monopoly. They did something I couldn't, and that's share the experience with others. You see, I could play around living out my imagination all day, but I couldn't really get others to experience my thoughts. I couldn't translate them to something rigid. That's where board games came in. They fascinated me and allowed me to have my experiences and somehow get others in on the fun, with rules and also structure. I wasn't too deep into the board game scene, mind you. Most of the games I played were casually with family, like Monopoly or Risk. So I found it. I found a way to share my thoughts and ideas. And that became what I wanted to do. It became my dream career then and there. I'm very lucky to have a supportive family, and I got to do things like this. Make my own version of Monopoly out of wood with my grandfather. I would also create my own cards for Yu-Gi-Oh! And so on. Eventually I got my hands on video games. I started off with demo discs from magazines, and I'd go reading through those magazines, really fascinated. The idea of building cities or leading armies was just unimaginable, and being able to see it play out and happen was like a dream come true. In my mind, it was a natural evolution, taking the rules and structures and somehow showing the world you envisioned in a living, breathing, dynamic form. And the rest is history. I eventually got into Flash games and then finally into PC gaming. This is the reason I never really liked consoles. I didn't play on them as a kid, and thus I have no emotional attachment to them, no nostalgia. You see, strategy was always my passion. I didn't really get into games like adventure games or platformers or puzzlers. I got into PC games for management or city builders or RTS or RPGs. Those are where my interests lie, and without them I would never pursue game development to begin with. I enjoyed games, and I learned a lot from them. So I want to give that experience onto others. Strategy games stood out in the fact that they often reflect the real world. They use facts ranging from history to economics to geography. I gained so much knowledge playing them in my free time, and I learned a lot about these fields. I would still go fact check them. Sometimes the facts were a bit exaggerated, but oftentimes there was much to learn. I had a natural affinity to these topics, mind you, and I still remember reading an atlas before getting into digital games, and being fascinated by flags and how the world looked. My fascination with maps extended into the types of games I enjoyed playing at the time, and now I enjoy making. I simply enjoy the process of creating a game. It's different than creating an app or a website. It feels more involved and fun to make. My passion led me to learn software engineering. At the time, I thought it would get me the closest to my goal. It also offered me an opportunity I didn't think of. I saw people who, instead of wanting to make games, were fascinated by companies like Google or Facebook or Amazon. They were interested in tech companies, not just games. They wanted to make apps or websites and everything in between. I even met people who were fascinated by programming for its own sake. Speaking of, did you know that competitive programming is a thing? It was surprising for me too, but my goals were clear. Programming was a tool in my tool belt, not a goal. I will admit I did grow fond of programming, especially as strategy games disproportionately have a lot of it. It's more complicated to design an economic simulation than make a character jump in most cases. So I enjoyed the process. Out of all of what makes a game tick, programming is what I enjoy the most. And I think, in a way, it's the most essential core aspect that glues all of the other elements together. In the metaphorical sense, however, I do enjoy design as well. Unlike programming, which is the most physical core of the game, design gives purpose, it gives structure. It is the why to the programming's how, and you need both of them to make a good game. I hope my story can help you shed some light on your own journey. Why do you do the things that you do, and what makes you tick? If it's games, what about them do you love doing the most? Which genre and platform attracts you the most? You can learn a lot about yourself in the process, and why you do the things you do. So remember to think and observe. And as always, thanks for watching.